The 2023 Kentucky Derby Barn Tour continues. Let's check out Brad Cox. What is up, everybody? My name is Colin and he is Matthew DeSantis at Fail to Menace. Matt, we're looking at the Brad Cox Barn Tour, but first, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk to you about the barn tours. And as we're going through some of these major trainers that have multiple entries in the Kentucky Derby. And obviously, we have been tracking this Brad Cox barn the entire Derby season. And now we're finally here. And son of a gun, if these things didn't all come to fruition, he has 4 horses in this field.
Yeah, and I'll start there. We talked in our other barn tour about Todd Pletcher. We have one on Tim Yak Team. Pletcher's kind of the most starts in Derby history with 62. And in his first, couple of years, he had 7 starters. With these 4 starters, Cox is going to be up to 9 in his first 3 years. Pletcher's kind of been doing it for a long time. What are we getting with Brad Cox here on this burst on the scene of all of a sudden having 4 starters this year?
Yeah, listen, I think a lot of this actually you can trace back to 2 years ago when he had Essential Quality and Knicks Go as his top 2 horses in his barn. And he wins the Breeders' Cup Classic, of course, with Knicks Go, Essential Quality, the Belmont winner, finishes third that day at the Classic with Medina Spirit between them. But that was an indication, I think, to a lot of ownership groups, to a lot of breeders, that Brad Cox can get your horse ready and Brad Cox can get your horse firing on a big day. And so it was not surprising that last year, yes, he had some decent horses with Zozos and Cyberknife and a few others, but it really was more about the fact that all of a sudden you started to see these very precocious 2-year-olds and very precocious yearlings going back to 2 years ago were suddenly getting housed with Brad Cox. And so to some extent, what you saw is the success he had 2 years ago is now paying off now in this year's Kentucky Derby.
Yep, because remember, the Kentucky Derby is for 3-year-olds. We have to remember who our audience is. We've seen Absolutely. A big uptick in our numbers and our views and of subscribers. So we know a lot of you are tuning in for the first time, and sometimes not to talk down on our audience at all, but we have new people that are checking it out. And so remember, The Kentucky Derby is for 3-year-olds only. So let's take a look at Brad Cox. As we mentioned, he's only had 5 starters. The one winner was 2021 Mandaloun, but he didn't get to celebrate that win on Kentucky Derby Day because that was the race with Medina Spirit and Bob Baffert, where he was crowned the Kentucky Derby champion 9 months later. So, Matt, do you consider him a Kentucky Derby winning trainer?
I don't. I consider him a Breeders' Cup winning trainer, and that's actually maybe even more prestigious within the industry to be considered a Breeders' Cup winning trainer. It's hard to consider him a Derby winning trainer because of everything you said. Obviously, Medina Spirit getting tossed and DQ'd from the Kentucky Derby because of that positive test, a few picograms over the limit, and that obviously leading to Bob Baffert's 2-year suspension from Churchill Downs, which is why he is still not present in this year's Kentucky Derby. I know technically he is a Kentucky Derby winning trainer, but I am sure, just as Bill Mott is sure with Country House, that you want to eventually get a horse to cross the finish line first. Then you really feel like you're a Kentucky Derby winning trainer. And that's going to be something that Brad Cox has a lot of shots at this year with 4 entries in the race.
Bill Mott at least got to celebrate, though.
He did get to celebrate on the day of, you're right, because of the DQ of maximum security. But it was same sort of thing. I mean, you even heard him at Bill Mott recently, not to diverge off to Bill Mott, but you heard him talk recently about, I really would like to get a horse across the finish line first. I mean, I think that really matters. And I think if you ask Brad Cox, he would probably say the same thing.
So a different question in my wording is Brad Cox have the talent to be a Kentucky Derby winning trainer?
Oh, by far and away. He has a program, and he has built that program, and you can tell the big names within the industry, whether it is Godolphin from a breeding and ownership standpoint, as well as several other interests that he represents in terms of ownership groups. He has a program. He puts these horses through the program. They are very aggressive on the Derby Trail. They've had a ton of success on the Derby Trail this year. He can get horses ready for big days, and we've seen that in the Breeders' Cup. We've seen that on this year's Derby Trail. So he absolutely has the talent to be a Kentucky Derby winning trainer. And I think if we talk 10, 15, 20 years from now, he might very well end up being the winningest Kentucky Derby trainer that we've ever had.
Yes, and here's a look of the 4 that are at least starting, but I just want to quickly name off some other names of when we started this whole trail to the Kentucky Derby of horses that were very much in the conversation. And he had the longest list,
Yeah.
led by Loggins, of course, Tappett's Conquest, Instant Coffee, Giant Mischief, Victory Formation, Tappet Shoes, Woody the Bird Spotter, Iron Clover, Hit Show, who's obviously on this list, but the list kind of was
Corona Bolt as well, who
Corona
ended up
Bolt.
becoming a really good sprinter. Yeah.
Exactly. So that just shows you when we said this guy might have 10, 11 starters, we said it in jest, but at the time he was on the name of all the lists. But here are the 4 that he has: Angel of Empire, Verifying Hit Show, and Jace's Road. What's just your overall general sense of the barn that he's bringing to the Kentucky Derby?
Interesting. I mean, a little bit like Pletcher, and that very dynamic in terms of each one has a slightly different role, a slightly different running style. Jace's Road verifying forward, Angel of Empire, much more of a closer, Hit Show somewhere in between, probably. And so interesting to see how they all kind of complement and play against each other a little bit in this. But much like Todd Pletcher, kind of also a balancing act with Brad Cox. As you mentioned, all those other names, he had a lot of people to move around, and he was very active in multiple circuits, whether it was up in New York, whether it was in the fairgrounds in New Orleans, whether it was at Oak Lawn in Arkansas. He had horses going in a lot of different directions, even down in Florida in some instances for these different races. So, it's a tough task that he has, but I think he's got a really nice group here. And I think, I think it's probably a little top heavy out of this group. I think Angel of Empire, I think you had it listed in the right order. I think Angel of Empire is really the key horse in this entire field, though.
Yeah, he's one of the ones that I'm extremely interested in. He got here by way of winning the Risen Star in the Arkansas Derby. I think the way that he finished the Arkansas Derby is certainly what garnered my attention. 101 on the Brisnet. I love that Pratt was really quick to jump on Angel of Empire. He was kind of the first one that's aside from Irad on Forte, which was just a given. He was really the first one that just came out and said, we knew right away that he was going to be riding Angel of Empire. 2 pretty impressive ways in his last 2 races. I also want to note that he ran at Fairgrounds and at Oak Lawn, so showed a little bit of diversity as far as the track is concerned. Hasn't run at Churchill Downs, something that I'm interested in because there's one horse. Do you know the one horse that has 2 wins over the Churchill Downs track going into the Derby?
I know Two Phils has 1 win. Does he have 2 as well?
Nope.
Who?
Confidence Game.
Oh yeah, sure.
So something to keep an eye on, obviously separate of this video, but I came across that today when I was doing my little who's had success there. And Angel of Empire stood out because of the success he's had also at Indianapolis. So 3 courses that he's had victories over. What's your interest in Angel of Empire?
I have a lot of interest in this horse. He's a Pennsylvania bred. So as a native of Pennsylvania, I'm also kind of very partial to this horse, but you hear Cox talk about this horse, and it was pretty clear that they knew that he was going to be a slow developing horse, that he was a lot of legs. He needed a lot of time to kind of grow into his body, grow into his running style, that he was going to like more distance, that, it's important to remember Colin, you bring up a great point for people who are watching, who may not be very familiar with the Derby Trail. A lot of times these 2-year-olds, when they start running, are running sprints, right? They're running 5, 6, 7 furlong sprints, because that's all 2-year-olds are typically running. Well, a horse like Angel Empire isn't going to do well in those settings. This is not a sprint horse. This is a 2-turn horse that the more ground you give him, the better he's going to do. Very impressed by his maturation, his process. When he finished second, I believe, to Victory Formation back at in a listed stakes
Smarty
race
Jones.
and the Smarty Jones. Thank you. That was one where the gallop out was very impressive, very obvious. This horse wanted more and more distance. And he was a real big long shot that day, too, when he finished second with Joe Talamo aboard. But the Risen Star, I think, has come back pretty strong, actually, with Two Phils, who finished third that day, coming back to win the Jeff Ruby. Then he goes up to Arkansas and just really blows away the competition. And like you said, Flavien Prat. I like Angel Empire, and I'll be honest, I like him a little bit more because of another Brad Cox horse who drew into the race, Jace's Road, because I know Jace's Road is going to make sure there's an honest pace for Angel of Empire to run into.
Which leads us to the Angel of Empire Brisnet running style. They have him as an S2. What that means is that this horse prefers to be in the back of the pack and favor a strong late run. I'm missing a word there on my font. don't you think that that is cause for concern for Angel of Empire? Because we've talked about maybe there not being much pace up front, and that is not a style in the history that you want in the Kentucky Derby. Rich Strike is an outlier, so everyone that's thinking last year, oh, these horses can come and all the way from the back and win these races, that's not the typical way you do it. Those are the two concerns I have with Angel of Empire.
I think that's totally fair. I think historically, people remember races like Rich Strike. They remember races like Mind That Bird, and the incredulousness of Durkin's call, Mind That Bird, just kind of coming out of nowhere. Those are the exciting ones. What's not exciting is when they run in a carousel, which is usually what happens at the Kentucky Derby, which is the horses that are up near the front finish up near the front. And so it is concerning, and you need a little bit of a pace duel for Angel of Empire to really run into. He's been lucky in that he's gotten a good pace to run into in that Risen Star, in that Arkansas Derby, strong paces up front in both. Will he get that strong of a pace? I don't think he's going to get a 46 and change opening half mile. And if that's not the case, then you do wonder. Now, this horse really is going to like the distance. And I think that's the counter argument, which is to say, he's going to like 10 furlongs, and maybe not every horse in this field is going to like that distance. And so it may not be the pace, but the pedigree that ultimately pays off for Angel of Empire.
Next up at the Brad Cox barn, easy for me to say, is Verifying, who's had two key races, but look, there's no wins. It's second in the Bluegrass and a fourth in the Rebel Stakes. But as we talked about, there's a variety of ways in which Cox could win this race when it comes to pace, and Verifying is kind of the opposite of what we talked about with Angel of Empire. Where are you at with Verifying?
So I'm a lot further out on Verifying than other people are, especially on this channel. Even El Hombre, our good colleague, is, I know, very high on this horse. I am concerned by exactly what you said, which is his best win is an allowance win over Two Eagles River, who just finished, I think, fourth in kind of the junior varsity Kentucky Derby Bathhouse Stakes, ran at Oaklawn this past weekend. So that's my concern, is like his best win is not that great of a win. And when he's gone up against the best competition, he's either A, gotten himself into trouble, or B, not been able to outduel a horse like Tapit Trice, who he lost to in the Bluegrass. Now, as I've said before, if you think Tapit Trice is the first or second best horse in this field, then Verifying just barely losing to him probably impresses you. I don't know if I have that high of an opinion of Tapit Trice, therefore I don't have that high of an opinion of Verifying. He's going to have some company up front as well. I think King's Barnes, I think, Jace's Road is going to be up there. I think there's a few horses that are going to be up there, and we'll see how Verifying ends up going. But I think there are definitely some concerns with him there.
This is the workout this week from Churchill Downs. Verifying is there on the outside. Hit Show is there on the inside. I think that in the Bluegrass, Verifying didn't really have any excuses. I think that's what concerns me.
Yep.
Had kind of what you'd call maybe I don't know if you call it the perfect trip, but really
certainly an ideal setup for that race. Yeah.
Yeah, which you would have liked to see him. He did battle well, and I can't fault you. I haven't really fully decided on where I'm at with Verifying yet, if I'm being honest. I haven't tossed him. I haven't landed on him that I'm definitely going to use him. And I feel like that's kind of where I think he's going to end up for me anyways.
Probably. Yeah.
And there you have the Brisnet running style of E7. So he has the ability to be on the lead at the first call or the second, or within 2 lengths of the lead. So he's going to be what we consider to be in the forwardly placed flight of horses. And as we talked about, regardless of how you feel on Verifying, looking at the race, if you took the names out of it, that's a style of a horse that you want. The only thing I would not be totally crazy about is the E7 is usually horses that really want to be on the lead and not necessarily in that behind the second flight. And I wonder, that's how he won his maiden breaker. And that's the one where he went wire to wire. And the other ones, when he hasn't, you said his other one is an optional claimer. When he gets behind horses, you wonder if he really likes to pass them,
Yeah, it's a concern. And it's a concern because, interestingly, in one of Cox's other horses, Jace's Road is going to be right up there on the front as well. So, that's a little bit of a difficult dynamic to mitigate, to say which of these horses do we want to get the lead, which horse can handle rating better than the other one. That's a complicated web that they're going to weave. And also, a lot of this is going to it's going to come down to how they draw on the Monday of the Kentucky Derby. Depending on where Verifying it draws, that's going to really dictate what he's got to do out of the gate. How much does he have to gun it? How important is it to get the lead? If he draws a little further outside, maybe you can rate and still stay out in the clear. If you're drawing in the inside 5 or 6 positions, he's got to go. That's going to be his only chance.
So is this the way you've seen the order of the Cox horses?
Largely, yes. I think so. I think Hit Show and Jace's Road are kind of quite a bit below Verifying and Angel of Empire. I do think Angel of Empire is by far and away the best out of his barn.
So let's take a look at Hit Show. Hit Show is the key winner of the Withers and ran second in the Wood Memorial, second to Lord Miles, who was a really big long shot in that race. Does that, and I know how you kind of feel about the Gotham and the New York circuit.
Yeah.
Where are you on Hit Show coming out of the Wood Memorial, second, losing to a long shot like Lord Miles?
Well, losing to a long shot happens. I mean, if fluky things happen, it was a photo finish too. I mean, between first, second, and third, it was very, very close. I mean, Hit Show ran a heck of a race that day. We should say from the far outside post too. I mean, so he had, just as we said, Forte had to overcome a lot. Hit Show had to overcome a lot there. What I can't get over is something that actually happened very early in the prep season, which was Hit Show was initially entered in the Southwest Stakes, and they drew the field. Hit Show was part of that field, and he was given a 10-1 morning line, which I think most of us viewed as accurate in that race. He decides to withdraw from that race, goes up to the Withers, which gets delayed a week because of weather, and goes off as the 8-5 favorite in that race. Now, that should tell you everything you need to know about the quality of fields that was taking place in Oaklawn versus what was taking place at Naira over the winter. And listen, that's not breaking news. So that Withers, I'm not going to take anything away from him, but he beat a horse in Arctic Arrogance who did a lot of heavy lifting up front and who ended up not being able to really stretch out much. So I think it's one of those things where I'm not overwhelmed by Hit Show. I think he's an honest horse. I think he runs really hard, but I just don't view him as the same caliber of some of the upper echelon horses in this particular field. I think El Hombre and I joked about this when we did the Hit Show spotlight. I'd love to own him. I'd be thrilled if I owned a horse like Hit Show, but I just don't see him winning this year's Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, and there's only 2 horses that are in the Derby from that Southwest, which was Sun Thunder and Jace's Road, who, maybe was a little bit of avoiding your own barn with Jace's Road was in that race as well. Hit Show's running styles, P4, as we talked about, he's got a closer, he's got early, now he's got the P4, which is the ability to stay in touch with the leaders at the first call and be more forwardly placed. I think, like you said, it was impressive that he was drawn way outside in that Wood Memorial, but I think if it's up to him, he probably wants to be a little bit closer to the rail, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, he's going to want to be closer to the rail. I'd say he's a little bit on the distance compromise side at 10 furlongs, and so he's going to want to save as much ground as he can. Like I said, an honest horse, and that was a tough finish. He's finishing between Lord Miles and Dreamlike. That's always tough to be the middle horse in a 3-horse kind of trio that's coming down the wire. So he's got some guts to be able to split horses and try to make that move with Manny Franco aboard. It'll be interesting to see who obviously ends up being his jockey if Manny continues to take the mount for Hit Show moving into this. But like I said, I think he's a very nice horse moving forward. He's the type of horse, quite frankly, I love to see run at 4 and 5 years old, because I think he's only going to get better with age. And I think you get him at that like mile and a 16th, mile and an 8th, and he might be really good as he gets older.
Last up is Jace's Road. We just found out he's drawn in. Luckily, I put him on this graphic when I made it, but I didn't make a lower third graphic for him, which shows you how breaking news that was for him. Yeah. Jace's Road, I think, is a little bit of compromise by some races on the slop, which he just did not like. So if it's raining on Derby Day, I think you could pretty easily toss Jace's Road. He does get the EP5 for his running style, which so now Cox literally has all 4 of the Brisnet running styles that you could possibly be assigned. Yep. He ran 3rd in the Louisiana Derby behind King's Barn, lost by 6 lengths. He did win the Gun Runner back the day after Christmas, beating Ray's Can, a horse by the name of Determinedly, who was doing pretty well at that point, never really kind of moved forward after that. Was 3rd behind Curly Jack, another name you might remember back in Churchill Downs. So if you draw a line through those 2 sloppy races, which were 2 grade 3s, and he finished 12 and 36 lengths behind. He's got 2 wins and 2/3. Fairly respectable. But when you put him up against this quality of the other high contenders, to me, he might be someone I'm going to fade. Where are you thinking? He's owned by West Point, which you had mentioned some ownership shares there as well.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Brad Cox has got the same juggling act that Todd Pletcher does, which is he basically has like 3.5 different ownership interests between these 4 horses. That the owner of Angel of Empire is a part owner of Jace's Road, but West Point also has several shares of Jace's Road as well. But then Verifying and Hit Show have separate owners unto themselves as well. So he's doing the same thing where he's trying to move these horses to different areas so they don't run against each other. They can earn the maximum amount of points. They can all qualify for the Derby. All the owners are happy so that they all get their Derby horse, etc. I am worried about Jace's Road in terms of distance. That Louisiana Derby, I think, was particularly telling. If people have not watched it, go back and watch it. Really, King's Barn crawls up front. They set very slow fractions for the first 3 quarters. Jace's Road is sitting right off of King's Barns. And you think, okay, this is kind of a pretty nice setup for Jace's Road because now he's going to be able to kind of make a move at the top of the stretch. And what happens, King's Barns just blows away and Jace's Road is losing ground the entire way. Now, that race was at 1 mile and 3/16. Now we're adding distance onto this race. They're not going to go that slow up front anymore. And now you're expecting me to think that he's going to suddenly kick into another gear, going longer and faster. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, the speed figures are light as well. He does have 2 races over the Churchill Downs track with 1 third-place finish back in September. He does have a couple races, as we mentioned, as a 2-year-old, so the foundation is there. But for me, Jace's Road would be a pass. Anything else you'd add on the Brad Cox barn?
Listen, whether he wins or loses this year, one of the things I'll say is this is a barn tour that we're going to be doing every year for the next several years, I have a feeling. He is a very legitimate contender. And listen, he's got some horses. When we get ready for the Preakness, when we get ready for the Belmont, he's got horses we haven't even talked about that are going to be in those fields. A horse like First Mission, who won the Lexington, is going to be at the Preakness. A horse like Bishop's Bay, who hasn't even run in a stakes competition yet, is probably going to be in one of those 2 races or in a big-time race up at Saratoga this summer. He's got an elite barn with a ton of colts. You ran through that list of names earlier, and those horses are really good. They might not have made the cut for the Derby, but a horse like Corona Bolt, for instance, it's just distance compromise. So he's just a stakes-winning sprinter now. I mean, it's an impressive barn that he has, and people may not know a lot about him in the general public, but he's going to become one of those faces of horse racing in the next 5 to 10 years for sure.
That was actually one of the questions I forgot I was going to ask you at the beginning, which was everyone recognizes the Bob Baffert look, the glasses and the white hair. Is Brad Cox someone that everyone should familiarize themselves with? And you just answered that. I'm amazed at how he keeps track of all his horses. And he does these interviews with Steve Bick, and Bick's just running through them. And you're like, oh, my God, how many more could he possibly have? And he knows exactly what they've been doing, where they're going. And to me, it's so impressive. I mean, I guess if I had like 60 dogs, I would remember, who's been walked and who needs to go out and, their habits and stuff. So I guess it's you're a little removed from it, so it's harder to envision it. But I'm really impressed with how they keep track of it all just like that. It's amazing.
It's incredible. And what I'll say is Brad Cox, if people have not been out to the racetrack, Brad Cox has already had a huge impact on the culture of horse racing, because the amount of mesh trucker hats that men between the ages of 25 and 45 are wearing at the track has skyrocketed. Folks, if you have stock in mesh trucker hats, buy, because that is Brad Cox's signature look. You got the blue tinted glasses for Baffert. Brad Cox always kind of with a rumpled suit, the open neck, because he's got a thick neck, so he's never got a tie. It's always loose, top button unbuttoned, and then a blue and white trucker hat. That's his look, and that's a look that's going to get replicated a lot at the track in the coming years.
And we haven't even seen his best 3-year-old run this year yet, which is a horse by the name of Loggins. So watch out when he gets back on the track, because he's going to make the rest of this crop look
straight to the Breeders' Cup Classic, baby.
Next flight line. All right, he's Matt DeSantis. I'm Colin Sheehan. Please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more of our Barn Tour series.